You know, I talked about cars a little bit this week. I got a little bit of history with that, a little bit of background, and I put up a picture on the community, Don Pradome, with his front engine dragster with a Ford Camry in it, and Pradome drove for Roland Leong. He drove a lot of his early Hawaiians, dragster, and funny car. Roland had a few drivers. When he got out of the driver's seat to concentrate on crew chiefing, he had several drivers. Pradome was one of them. And then when Pradome had his own cars, he raced a Ford Camry. Connie Coletta raced a Ford Camry. A lot of big names raced a Ford Camry. And at that time, Chrysler had the 392 Hemi. And and I remember hearing something, being around the Tasker race shop since the time I was 7 years old. Due to I cringe when I say my Uncle Tony. I had my mother's older brother. He was best friends with Bobby Tasker's old man from the time they were teenagers. And I used to hang around there when I was a kid. From the time I was 7 years old, I'd see them prep their stalkers and super stalkers, take to an event. They ran a gasser, they ran a pro stalker, they ran an AFX car. And then they have a lot of cars saved, even Bobby's early alcohol cars before he got into fuel. And they got a few of these cars saved, for old time's sake. And they had a Camry there, and they had a Fairlane Thunderbolt. Still there. Tasker Ford on the side. And and I remember hearing about that. All the Mopar guys. Oh, the Ford Camry sucked. That's why they all went to the 426 Hemi. But there's a reason why there was a big shift from the Camry to the Chrysler Hemi. And it had nothing to do with performance because the Camry could hold its own with a 426 Hemi. The 392 is already a little too small, but that's all Chrysler had at the time, you know. And Chrysler, they really started throwing all their backing into drag racing, even though they were heavily involved in NASCAR. They got just as involved in drag racing, you know. Bill Jenkins, he's famous for, beating up on the 426 Hemi with his 327s. He was Stockman, super Stockman until Pro Stock came out in 1970, and he was the driving force behind it. Getting water races together, said, listen, we want to be able to do a little bit more than you're allowing us to do within the rules limitations of Superstock. They could only go with what the best offered engine from the factory was. And he went with a 327. He was beating up on the 426 Hemis, the Ford 390s, and now he started racing a 427. I got sidetracked. I hate it when I do that to myself. But what happened with Ford was, now when you get a little more into the 60s, Ford started shifting more of their attention to NASCAR. And when you get factory backing, they have a specific engine development program put aside that's not so much for production cars, even though with many manufacturers, a lot of what they developed in racing, some of it trickled into the production cars. The development of the Cobra Jet 428, a lot of what the Taskers did with their 1968, their little tricks here and there, quite a bit of it went into the production aspect of the street production car you could buy, 428 Cobra Jet, leading into 1970. And after that, you got your Cobra Jet 429. I think that debuted in 1970 in the Torino Cobra Jets. For some reason, you could get it in the Torino, but not in the Mach 1, not the Mustang. And it wasn't just the 428 bought out an inch, it was an entirely different engine. It was based on the tall deck 460 block. It was a different block design. It was a tall deck. It had a little bit longer stroke, produced more torque, a little bit less horsepower, compression ratios to drop, but it was a damn good engine, But anyway, Ford started backing away from development and drag racing. more and more to a point where they stopped all their R&D and development program for the camera. Street, now they had their Thunderbolt and the Fairlane 427s. Limited production, And these cars went to races. They were so limited in production. You had to really know somebody that knows somebody that knew somebody. Like a couple of guys got them from Tasco only because they were real good friends of his. All the rest went out to race teams, and he had his own race team. What happened was there was just no more parts. The Chrysler guys, they could get all the parts they wanted from Chrysler. In fuel cars, they go through all the parts. Between rounds, they're burning valves, melting pistons, cracking heads. A lot of damage goes on with those cars, But they always had the parts available. They were pretty cheap. Chrysler was really throwing all their weight behind them. Ford now had stopped everything. What they had for parts was in the inventory. When it was gone, it was gone. These guys had nowhere to turn. That's why they made the big switch over to Chrysler. A lot of these races, they hung on for like an extra season. Because some races now that, back then we had a lot of privateers, man. No big corporate backing, Eddie Hill, one of my favorite Nitro races, the Flying Texan with his yellow flying bananas. He started out in Nitro drag boat racing. He was a privateer. He raced out of his own pocket. Prize money winnings is what kept him going. Later on, he got sponsorship. He got super shops. Even though he was not teammates with Don Garlitz, Garlitz also had a super shop sponsorship. They were not teammates, but they both got good sponsorship. A guy by the name of Jim Head. There were many races that they won races. They made enough prize money that they could support their car and continue on, which led to big sponsorship eventually. You know what I mean? So a lot of these guys had to drop out back then. They had no sponsorship, but they had a car. They had a good engine in it that wasn't too badly busted up from the previous event. They had a little stockpile of parts here and there. They were buying up everything they could from guys that weren't racing anymore just to try to keep them going to get them through the season. So that's the main reason the Ford Camel went away in top fuel drag racing. It wasn't that, it couldn't compete with the 426 Hemi. They just couldn't get the fucking parts anymore. That's what it came down to, I had that one Ford I raced, the SGJ 428. I put in a 70 Boss 302. The 302 is tired, and I like big inch engines. 421 Super Duty in my first Pontiac, 428 Super Duty in my second. My last Camaro with that Pig 190 horsepower. Beautiful car, I already got to that end of the building, a 427 from an LS6 454 with a 396 L78 crank in it, stroked it down because it had a bad bottom end. And anyway, that 350, I put some 198 power pack heads on it, cammed it, stuck it in my brother's little Pontiac Sunbird, got his Iron Duke 4-banger out of that thing. He was happy with it, That's my only real experience with a Chevy. There's a lot of hype that goes into cars. Boss 429 was just a real quickie development engine to get it certified for NASCAR. They had to put so many in a production vehicle to get certified for NASCAR. Like with the Winged Warriors, Superbird Daytona, they had to build so many, wasn't it, to be available to the public before they could get certified to race in NASCAR. That's what that Boss 4 was not intended to be a drag race street engine. You could do a lot to them. Dino Don Nicholson, ran one back in his pro stock days at a Maverick, A few guys ran him in pro stock. But the one you bought off the street, they were really not that great. The Corvajet 428 was far superior on the street. They were easier to maintain. You could do a lot with them. Once these 426 Hemis got into the NASCAR teams and what they were allowed to do with them, with modifications, now it became a real badass engine. But out on the street, I knew Mopar guys back in the day said, I'd rather have a 446 pack than a Heavy. They're easier to maintain. The power band is a little bit better, and you can do a lot more with them. What you got with a Hemi is pretty much what you had. You could take that 440, you could do so much with it that even if you did it with a Hemi, it would be far too expensive. And they were hard to keep tuned up. Those solid lifters, take it out for a weekend eraser, man. You go back into it. I don't know, I had one solid lifter cam, and I like my hydraulic rollers a lot better. And I love my Lunati cams, friends. Crane, Isky. Isky's a good cam too, but I like Lunati. Crowler also made a very good cam. My friends, we had all different brands of things, you know. We all had good luck with them. It's a matter of preference, I guess. But I always like Lunati. And yeah, and I used everything from fucking crush strips, you know, plastic gauge crush strips to get them set, feeler gauges, and then I ran poly locks. You know, those long studs with a threaded insert. Once I got it all adjusted, then you crank down that poly lock on the head of the stud to hold down retainer bolt so that way it wouldn't back off. Even then it would back off after like months and months of heavy driving. It would back off, the lifters are clacking and ticking, and gotta go in and readjust it. But without those poly locks, man, one weekend of racing at Industrial Park, come fucking Monday and Tuesday, man, they were fucking clacking. I was in there fucking adjusting them again. Some things are just more practical for the street, for what you're gonna use it for, you know. But that Boss 429 had less of a cam grind, less lift, less duration than a Boss 302. It had a smaller Holley 4-barrel carburetor than a Boss 302. And those cars were not, you know, well, 30-second cars. A lot went on with testing. A lot of cheating. Cars were lightened up. A lot of early 389 GTOs that went out for testing had Super Duty 421s under the hood. You can't tell the difference. You think these car magazine guys are looking up block numbers? The car gets to it. I remember when I was young, man, Tasker's old man told me himself. When the Cobra 428 came out in '68, he was approached by Hot Rodding, few magazines. Hey, can we have a car to take up to New England Dragway for a weekend? We'll ring it out, you know, do some pictures, you know, do a write-up on it, post all the times. He said, sure. Come back next week. He had one day we could have let him take right there. But a lot was done to that car. A lot was done to that car. You know, stories about the Mopars, early 383 Roadrunners. A lot of them had 440s under the fucking hood. You open the hood, it's a big block. It looks the same. These guys don't give a fuck. They just want to take it to a track race and take pictures, write up an article, post the times, and bring it back. That's all they give a fuck about. Cars were lightened up. Cars were going out with aluminum door skins, aluminum trunk lids, aluminum hoods, aluminum bumpers. All the sound deadening insulation was taken out of them. Heater cores were pulled out. They were stripped down for as much weight as they could. I remember hearing that, you know, the general rule of thumb was whatever car you saw tested in a magazine for a time, you go to buy one off a dealer, add anywhere from a half second to 3/4 of a second to the time, because that's all you're going to get out of it. That's not going to be the same car you read about in a magazine, okay? So anyway, I guess that's about it.